Hey everyone, this is a video that's specifically made for learning how to create tabs and lists inside Android Studio. I'm just going to get started with a starter project because it takes a little while for the whole thing to load. But just going to do empty activity, and I'm going to call it lists and tabs, and just use the default option and finish. And so we're going to get started. I do want to cover some theory on how lists and tabs work and modals work, and these kind of things work that we'll be covering. Alongside, I also want to show you what the bigger picture is, what we're trying to accomplish here, because this is more of a scheduled project, and obviously in this course you'll be expected to make something much more complex than this. So here's the starter project, and as you can see, we have a list over here which you can kind of modify according to your needs, and we have these tabs that you can go to. This is pretty much the same as stuff that you see on Facebook or whatnot, where you have all the content as lists or some sort of list, and you have tabs in which you can see different options. And another thing which I wanted to do was have some sort of an on-click action. So if you click on this, you create to have a modal of sorts. So this script or any of the web frameworks, that modals are used. And as you can see over here, details are the number of lines the item refers to, which is interesting. I don't know who wrote this in Google, but these are all based uh, on templates that are provided by Android Studio. So most of the code is not something that I had to do. Just click a couple of buttons and it happens. Okay, some theory and how we're going to accomplish this app. So the theory is, well, for every list that you have, you need to create some sort of a template for the singular object, and then you have some sort of a fragment or template of sort for how those little items are going to be coming together. And usually you have something called an adapter. Well, not usually, all the time. And the complex thing is how these adapters, how these things kind of work together, and how you achieve an on-click functionality. So we're going to be looking at these things in a second. And yeah, okay, and how we're going to be breaking the whole thing up is that in this one we created a blank project, and we'll have I've already done this. I already have an emulator running, and in the next part I will be creating a list, and in the third part we will be creating the remaining tabs. So we want to have something like 3 tabs. We can have, you can obviously name them whatever you want to name them according to your own application needs, and you can have the I'm calling these contacts because I started out wanting to make a contacts app, but you can name it whatever you want, and these items can refer to whatever you want it to begin with. And in the fourth part we'll be creating an adapter for the tabs. As you'll see, we don't have to create an adapter for the list because it comes with the template, but we have to write some sort of code to create adapter for the tabs. And in the last part I will be adding some on-click functionality, which, as you can see, if you click on item 1, it gives you some sort of a modal with details about item 1. So that is it for part 1. So for creating the list, as I mentioned before, we'll just be using the templates. And how do we go about using them? I'm going to right click here and then new and then fragments, and essentially we want a list for this one. So we're just going to see what we get, and they ask us what the type of object is and whatnot. So I'm just going to say that these are contacts, and so in the layout, so this is for a single contact, and this is for fragment for list of contacts. So my contact recycler view, So we can just call it contacts recycler view and finish. And so it is very important to give names which have some sort of a relevance to what we're trying to achieve from the app. And as you can see, we have some sort of a list over here. Look at the split code, and over here we have a um, singular contact, and it's kind of hard to see, but it's there. And here's the code, here's the contact recycler view. This is the adapter for the contacts, and this is the fragment, and there isn't a whole lot to it. I would encourage you to spend a couple of hours reading the code very carefully and trying to understand how this whole thing is coming together, but we don't have to actually write this one, right? So I don't have to for this one. You guys will have to customize it according to your needs. And let's move. So now we have a fragment for the context tab, but since we're making an app with multiple apps, we'll need different fragments for all of those different features. So if in a contacts app, you might want to have, let's say, a fragment for, so I'm just going to be putting in blank fragments, but obviously this should be a little bit more customized to your own project. So I'm just putting in blank fragments. So one of the fragments that I'd want to have here would be favorites, people I call the most. Or another one I'd probably want to have is and they're all blank, is history, so people that I might have called earlier. Again, this can change as per your own project requirement, but as you can see, these auto-generate the layout as well as the Java files for you. So now that we have all the fragments we need for the tab's layout, the next thing we're going to create is the adapter. So I'm just going to do right click, Java class, and I'll call this a tabs adapter, and that would be it. And this one is going to be so you can read up on, there's a link that should be available, a migration guide released by Android Studio, which kind of explains what are the non-deprecated latest features that are supposed to be used for this, and there's almost no other documentation for it. So I'd recommend looking at that if you want to see how this actually comes about. But we're going to be using the fragment state adapter for this, and this should tell us automatically what methods we're going to need. And I think that's about it. The only updates that we're going to make is that we have three tabs that we intend to create. So over here, get item count, we're going to return 3, and create fragment. Over here, since everything is 0 index, we're going to say, well, if position is 0 of a certain fragment in the tab, then return. So I want a new context fragment coming up. And the next thing on the page that I would want there to be would be favorites. So favorites, do we have a favorites fragment? fragment, no, not fragment activity, favorites, that should be favorites fragment, and else we're just going to, so this is for position 2 or the last position, we're just going to return history fragment. And that's it, so adapter should be done. As you might have noticed, I added a part. I didn't realize that, after we create the adapter, we also have to put the whole thing together. So I'll be doing that in this video, in which we have the adapter and we have all the fragments that we need for our app, but we don't actually have a layout to put the whole thing together. So first of all, I'll create a new layout, and I'm just going to say this is a layout resource file, and instead of a constrained layout, I want to go with a linear layout, and I'm going to call it a tabs organizer page, or tabs organizer. So this is where the whole thing is getting put together, and I'll just okay. And again, just so that we don't use deprecated code, I've kind of avoided certain things. And okay, let's see, fragment container view, recycler view, view pager 2, and yep, so this is something that we needed, a view pager, and other than that we need some sort of a tab layout. So just going to see if I missed that. Okay, here is the tab layout, and as you can see, they've kind of put the tab layout inside this thing, which wasn't the intention. I'm just going to put it over here, and we don't actually need all these tabs, so I'm just going to get rid of them. And here we have the view pager, here we have the tabs, and I am going to give them an ID, so let's do that. And the ID I want to give this one is just the global, so because we only have one set of tabs, global tabs layout, and I also want to give a name to the view pager. I'm going to just call it a pager, since there are no other view pagers. And this should be sufficient. As you can see, match width, match height, match parent, wrap content. Yep, I think this should go quite well together. And so this is where the whole thing should be coming together. The next thing that you want to be focusing on is we go to the main activity. So instead of creating a new activity, well, you can create a new activity, but I'm just going to be putting everything together inside the main activity. So Okay, so the first thing we want is we want to be able to access the tabs organizer. So I'm just going to put tabs organizer over here so that this activity is connected to the thing that we just created. And the next thing, again, we can you know yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be working with this, but you can just create a separate one for this, obviously. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be creating making sure that these variables that we just created are referencing the correct items. So and let me global tabs layout, that's the name I gave, and that's the name I gave to the pager. So now we have access to the bottom fragments where everything is going to go, which is called the view pager or the pager, and we have access to the tabs area, so we have both of these references. The third thing that we want is an adapter. So we just spent a while sort of creating the adapter, so there isn't anything significantly different about this. So we're just going to connect it to this activity, and just okay. So as you can see, the tabs adapter knows that we're dealing with this fragment's life cycle. So that is something we accomplished here. And we have set that adapter to the pager that we just got the reference for. All that's left is to kind of tell how the whole mediation is supposed to be done. So when you click on something, then something should be coming. And the way it's done over here is it's called a new, it's a tab layout mediator, and it takes in three variables. It takes in three variables. The first thing is the tabs layout, which we've already referenced. The second thing is the pager, which we've already created. And the third thing is a lambda function where we have the tabs and the position. So this thing is not very different to what we just created before. So I'm just going to go to my tabs adapter and just copy paste this. So what I have here is going to be not very different from that. So all we need to do is it's actually a singular tab, so every time it's going to be referencing a singular tab, and we're going to be set text. So all we're doing is telling the name of the tab. That's what's happening here. And that should be it, and all we have to do at the end is write dot attach, and the whole thing should be working together. And let's just run the emulator and make sure everything is working as expected. Yep, just want to update, the whole thing has come together without any errors, and we can move on to the next part. So now that we have a list and all the tabs, the next thing we want to do is add some sort of an onClick action. Well, how do we do that? On the context recycler view adapter, when the view holder is on create, and the view holder is being created for each of the contacts, we have to add listener to each one of them, so that if they press, some activity happens. So here's what we can do. We can we can add an onClick listener to a view folder. It's item view. Set onClick listener, and we're just going to create a new onClick listener, and it's you can just make a simple toast for it, and the first is always the context, and the length, and the text is you just click something, right? And just to give a sneak peek on what's going to be inside, we'll just have the view holder that we're creating the listener on, and we're just going to get some details, and that's it. So I just ran the emulator, and you can see if I click on it, then you just click details, and it gives the item number and details, and as you can see, the details are exactly the number of lines that the item refers to. So if it's 5, it's 5 lines, and 6, it's 6 lines. Okay, but let's move on to Modal. How do we go about creating a Modal? Well, the first thing we actually need is a layout resource, some sort of a fragment, some sort of a resource file for it. And over here I want to use the relative layout because it should be relative to the parent, should be just a small little box, and I am going to call it a contact pop out, or contact modal, yeah, and that's it. And we have a contact modal, and I just want it to look like a box, so I'm just going to say it's going to be 600 by 600 pixels, because I literally just want it to look like a box, and inside it I want there to be a text view. So let's add a text view, and size. Okay, so this should be the text view, and all that's left is adding some sort of an ID. Oh, there's already an ID on the top. I didn't see that. So text view, I'm just going to call it text view for modal, and that's it. So we just created our modal, and all we have to do is go back to the recycler view, and over here somehow add whatever text we put in the toast inside the modal. So how do we create a modal? Well, the first thing you need to do is use something called a dialog. So what is a dialog? Dialog is kind of like an activity, like a mini activity, and just like activity has to be created with the context and has to have a set content view, this is also going to need all of these details. So we're just passing on what life cycle we'll be needing, and then we'll be setting it with the view we just created, and that would be the contact modal, and that's it. So now we have a dialog. Next we want to identify the text view in which we want to put in the details. So let's do that. So text view modal. So we now have the text view, and I'm just going to make it scrollable because the text might at times actually be a lot for the modal to hold, because the size is still going to be limited. And inside the onClick listener, we are simply going to add the details. So set text, and we will actually set exactly the text that earlier we put on in the toast, and that should take care of everything. So here's a look at what we just created. If I click on any of the items, a modal appears. If I click outside, it disappears, and as you can see, the details are the number of items there are. And if I click on, let's say 24, and it doesn't fit, we can actually scroll at the bottom. Anyways, that's about it. Best of luck integrating this into your projects.